Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, leadership, resilience and mental health in an extended discussion with expert Roxanne Derhodge. Roxanne is a Forbes Executive Council member and resiliency speaker who works with individuals and organisations. Also, the strangeness of mixing with people again, and changing culture and introversion. So this is another episode with an extended discussion, mainly as a result of my ski holiday. I'd love to know your thoughts on the slightly longer interviews. Do drop me a message or comment on iTunes. As I'm out in the Alps at the moment, and I'll talk about it more when I return, but my first two reflections are on how odd it is to be meeting so many people. I've met more people in the last 2 weeks than in the last 2 years of the pandemic. It's been great to spend time with many leaders, authors, business owners and thought leaders, as there's about 50 of us all away on an extended networking trip. The full-on nature of that is, of course, tiring for an introvert, but well worth it. The big thing in the news this week seems to revolve around culture and how hard it is to change an embedded culture. The piece in the news, of course, is not about introversion at all, but it has left me thinking about the extrovert-biased culture in many firms that can reduce the effectiveness of many introverts. It's a subject I've covered before with introvert expert Joe Rawbone and culture expert Ben Drury. But I leave you a quick thought. What small thing are you doing this week to influence the culture in your organisation? Are you unwittingly joining in with behaviours and comments that embed culture? Or, hard as it may be, changing the way you and others act to change culture in the way you want? It's all very well having a great culture change programme, but the ongoing small reminders in a positive direction are vital. Perhaps it's as simple as giving introverts more space to speak, and that's something Roxanne talks about in our discussion. Just before speaking to Roxanne, a quick request for your help. What would you like to know about introversion, leadership and performance? Every week I'll answer one question and invite you to go to activateyourintrovert.co.uk where there's a box near the top of the page. Let's get on and chat to Roxanne. Welcome, Roxanne.
Well, thanks so much, John, for having me.
Just before we get into the whole resilience, leadership, mental health issues and the links there, I would love to know, are you an introvert, an extrovert, and probably more importantly, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think, I can say that I'm definitely an extrovert. I grew up, whether it was, they called me chatterbox, like I at a very, very young age. And I thought it was me just trying to fight. I grew up in a family of 6. I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago. And I was the middle child. So I got that nickname quite young. So I think even before I knew anything about Myers-Briggs or any of the other assessments, I realized that I was definitely an extrovert.
Tell me a bit more about resilience, because it seems to be almost a buzzword at the moment. Is it more than a buzzword? Is it important?
I think it's the time, right? Because in the last 2 years or 2.5 years, what we've experienced in business, we're talking about that. Like, how is it that leaders can be more resilient? How is it that team members can be more resilient, based on the different environments and things that we've all had to work through? I think it's the thing now that people are talking about. I think it's been something that has been in our worlds for a very long time. So resilience is just that. It's the capacity to experience something and the impact on you. How is it that you deal with it to get back to the present in a shorter period of time? So it's about awareness and so many other variables. And we all get triggered in whatever capacity, but what is it that I'm doing as an individual, as a leader, as a parent, as a partner, really, to deal with what's happening with me, so that I don't let it impact me in a way that destabilize my ability to function? And if it does, what steps am I taking to get back there as soon as I can?
If I'm a leader and I've got a very resilient team, I guess we have to accept in everybody's lives things happen from time to time, but how quickly can they bounce back? And that, I guess, is why I'm interested in it.
Well, I think it starts with relationship, right? Like, so I think as the leader with every organization, the leader's ability to demonstrate their capacity to be resilient becomes important. So if we think of what we've gone through with this pandemic, for instance, John, people were looking to see what their leaders were going to do. What are you going to do as a leader? Are you going to pretend that everything's okay? Because that's kind of the status quo. Oh, everything's all well and good. Or are you going to accept that things are pretty tough here? We're all worried. We're all scared on a micro to a macro level. I mean, this is the first time globally that we've had a global shutdown of the economy, all the way to I'm petrified because I've got aging parents that are in their 80s, to I have young children that I have to send to school. So there was so much moving parts. So I think what was asked of us as leaders in companies is show me your capacity to be real, but to also function at the same time. So how is it that you're going to feel? But ultimately, how are you going to function through something as big as we've gone through?
As a leader, why should you be bothered about that mental health or the resilience of your staff?
Well, I think it's important, right? Because gone are the days that we think we leave the personal version of ourselves at home and then we bring the work version of ourselves to work. Now we're recognizing and maybe being more open to talk about the entire person. So if you're having if you want people to be creative, productive, available, present, and working to their capacity, it's really about understanding your individual teams or individuals within your teams. So if you're not sure who I am, what I bring to the table, and what some of my potential things are, not that you have to be focused on what's happening in someone's private life, but knowing them as an individual overall allows that person to feel validated and seen and heard, so that when they are going through something, that you can say, I could say to you, hey, John, I realize that lately, you've been dealing with something, say, in reference to an aging parent. Just to have those little touch points. Not that I need to know every nuance of what's happening in your life.
I need to know that you care.
Yes. And if I know that you care, then I'm going to go, wow, I like that John Baker guy. I'm going to work a little bit harder for him, because he's not just looking at me on a P&L, what my profit and loss is in reference to whatever I'm dealing with. He knows me as a person. So he gets me. That must mean he's connected in some way as a person, not just to the business metrics or the KPIs that are supposed to be achieved.
And that makes a whole lot of sense as I think of my experience as a leader, as I think of my experience with leaders. But at the same time, I can visualize other people almost saying, where's the bottom line on that? You're telling me that people will work harder if I care about them? Do you have any?
Well, I think it's a bit of both, right? Like, people need to be connected, but ultimately people still have to perform. I'm not suggesting that you care about people and they're not, performing at the level that's needed. I'm suggesting it's a gentle balance, that if we are, and what we're seeing with the new resignation now, kind of globally, is people are going where they feel valued. They are going to say, well, maybe I'm not going to do that long commute, and have these 12-hour days that so many people are having before. And through the pandemic, most people are saying, I want to be valued. I want to live with meaning and purpose. And I want to make a difference. It's not just about a job anymore, or we want to leave that, I would say, an imprint with wherever we're at. And we're seeing that based on what's happening with people, going to a different environments that suits better what they're looking for.
And I think, when you touched on the great resignation that's going on at the moment, or has been talked a lot about in the news over the last few months, but also a lot of the younger people are growing up wanting to make that difference, wanting to make a contribution, and they're less interested in some of the things that you or I may have been in when we were that age. So
absolutely, we were kind of, okay, how do I do it? What does it take to achieve it? I will get it done, and I I don't rethink it, and then we delay that gratification to say, I'll get to the meaning and purpose at some point in my career. And I think the younger generation is now saying, well, these are my top values. This is how I want to create meaning and purpose. I want to, do very well in a career, but I'm trying to find the right fit. So from a perspective of attracting and retaining your talents, that's, I think, a frame that leadership now has, not that they didn't know it before, but now the numbers are showing it that much more when people are losing some of their key people to other environments that are giving them the right fit.
So it's not new, it's always been around, but now it's, for different reasons, it's becoming more important.
I would say so. And now we're spending our money or doing things that we really want to versus things that we had to do in the past. So I think there's been a shift in, what people are willing to put up with. And before, people would say, well, I can't find something else, or I don't have the time to look. Now people are making, decisions based on how am I in alignment and where do I want to be. If I do have to spend the majority of our lives, which most of us do, working, I want to enjoy what I want to do, what I'm doing, but I also want to be in an environment where I feel connected to others that I'm around. So I think we're expecting more from work. We want to be happy at work.
A few minutes ago, you said something that was quite interesting. You said about people wanting to be heard and how that's important. And obviously that linked on to the conversation that we're having at the moment. And I just thought there's something interesting there, because very often I speak to introverts at work, and quite often, especially in meetings, they feel as if they're not heard. Mainly because the meetings are run badly, or it could be because the leader isn't aware enough of introversion. But what it made me think about is, if I categorize that as a mistreatment for a moment, or misunderstanding of introverts, do you think that can lead to some of the mental health resilience issues that you talk about?
I think if you think of traditionally, right, if we think of different corporate environments or whatever, who generally gets the airplay in meetings? I would say the extroverts, right?
I think I'll have to agree with you there.
So if you are an introvert and you're in a room, you get your energy internally, you are more reflective, and you may take time to synthesize the information to be able to articulate it in a way that sometimes I think is so high level that extroverts get run over, because extroverts are often, putting their hand up and wanting to answer a question. So I think it's the synergy between allowing the individuality of your team, especially people, if it's a third of your team or 40% of your team, that collates information in a different way. It's the leader's ability to bring that out on your teams versus going to whoever is the first one up, who's the first person up to answer the question or to give you perspective. And when you're seeing others on your team that are oftentimes quieter than others, you might say, I've heard from lots of people in this room, but I have a feeling that there's more perspective here. I'm just wondering, what is it that I could do to elicit the information that you may be thinking about right now? Is there a different way that we can do this? Because I think it's an awareness between a leader and his or her capacities or skills. And we all have fantastic skill sets, but then sometimes, you're always trying to accentuate what you're not so good at. If you're aware as a leader and you're recognizing that, there's 2 or 3 team members that are vital, but they don't seem to come forward in these kinds of formats, which is verbalizing in meetings, what other ways are you allowing them to be able to share information that could be quite valuable in these meetings?
And if they don't get the opportunity to verbalize that or to bring that forwards, that presumably affects their resilience in some way. It's going to press them down.
Because I'm thinking,
so the two subjects are kind of aligned in a way.
Right, absolutely. If I'm not being asked, and I don't think that, if you think someone's not sharing and you say, hey, Roxanne, you seem to, bring a lot to the table with these particular projects. I'm just curious, do you have perspective on this? Right. And they, it would be at that point, in that scenario that maybe I may not be willing to share about it, but I may say something like, you know what, I'm still thinking about that, but give me a bit of time and I'll get this information back to you, because I'm still synthesizing kind of what you've just shared with us in reference to what's going on.
Yeah.
So I think it's saying to introverts, you're valuable. I need to hear from you, but it may not be in the formal kind of way that meetings afford it.
Absolutely. And I often talk about the way you structure the meeting so that it's not just extrovert airtime that's going on. But jumping on a second, before we were on air earlier, you were talking about the time back when you used to work and you'd have some introverts that worked for you. And as an extrovert, sometimes you wondered what was going on there. Communications wasn't always effective.
So I'm as guilty as every other extrovert, John. As a leader, I ran a facility, outpatient clinic for 10 years. And I felt like, and this is one of my early leadership positions, I felt like I had 10 different personalities, but they weren't. But anyway, there was about 4 out of the 10 that were very introverted. Smart though. When I got to know what they brought to the table, because it was my inability as a leader to recognize, once I got to know them and they got to know me a bit more, just for time and consistency and trust, psychological safety, right? So as an extrovert, I expect everybody to tell me what's on their mind. You just tell me you got something going on, you just tell me. Not thinking that sometimes people are not comfortable, even though they're psychologically safe with you. At first, I was kind of thinking, are they trying to be difficult? Because what would happen is, let's say there was a big change coming to a strat plan or something like that, and I was delivering it, and I'm thinking I'm being open. And then what would happen is, there was one particular person I could think of. He was so methodical and microscopic that he would trip me up every time, honestly.
But not deliberately.
And at first I thought he was trying to make me look bad, John, but he really wasn't trying to make, because my ego was like, whoa, what's happening? And then after a while, when I learned to say, okay, calm down in my brain, what is he sharing? What is his perspective? Because my brain didn't work like that. So it allowed me to have more of an objective frame, and sometimes a diametrically opposed position or thinking about something that I hadn't thought about before.
And that's when you start to be able to bring out the strength of your whole team, because as you said, different people think in different ways, and it's that culmination of all the different ways that makes a team powerful. Perhaps we could just end by asking for a tip that you might offer an introvert who wants to be more resilient at work.
I think for an introvert, I would say, keep your value. Like, you get energy from your internal space. Yeah, there may be some things that you might want to learn skill-wise, but don't change who you are. Relish in that gift that you have. However, start to think, when you do have something to share, what skill might I want to enhance a bit to be able to deliver it? And the introverted way might be to do it a certain way, but potentially think, if I can find myself somewhere in the middle to share, not completely extroverted. We don't want you to be extroverted. Sometimes, like I said, as an extrovert, we miss major things.
How about a tip for a non-introvert, perhaps a team leader, a manager that wants to help improve the resilience of their team?
Learn to read your room as a leader. Try to understand or learn something about each team member. And if you are finding that your introverts are bold, I'm going to use the word bowled over, you create the space to allow them a voice and let them share.
I know some of the listeners are going to want to get back in touch with you, so I'd love you to give your contact details, but I'd also like you to tell us very quickly about your new book, ROR Authentic Relationships.
Yes, it's about to be released in the next 6 weeks. It's about leadership and what leaders need to do to enhance their capacity to be more resilient themselves, so that in turn they can impact their teams and help grow their teams. You can reach me at roxannederhodge.com.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, John.
I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful.
There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourintrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.